Well, good morning. I would like to call the Wednesday, July 17th meeting to order. We will begin with roll call. Haley Molina, present. Stephen Nicole, present. William Press, present. Eleanor Burke, present. Nagendra Hassan, present. Louis Haywood, absent. Lindsay Glass, absent. Joanna Farley, Lindsay Glass, present. Joanna Farley, absent. At this time, would the committee make a motion to adopt the minutes from the June 12th meeting? And then we have a motion by HDLC.
Second.
And a second by City Planning. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And the motion passes. We will now begin the consideration of dockets. Due to the number of items on today's agenda, it is necessary to limit each case to no more than 25 minutes per item. The staff will provide a brief overview, and then the applicant will have 10 minutes to present. We will then hear public comments, and each person will have 2 minutes to speak. If there is opposition, the applicant will have 5 minutes to rebut. The committee will then discuss the project and can ask questions, and then we'll vote on the application. The second item on today's agenda is the consideration of design review 1724. This is a request for an administrative design review of the CCN Neighborhood Development Master Plan. This was previously reviewed at the June DAC meeting and deferred to allow the applicant to provide additional information and for all committee members to have a chance to comment. The review of the development master plan must be complete by August 11th, so the DAC will have back at today's meeting. This request is being reviewed concurrently with the next item on today's agenda, design review 624 for an office building located on parcel 2A. The development master plan must be approved prior to final approval of the office tower. Both items are on the same review schedule. The development master plan addresses the general layout of the entire overlay area, including a plan for proposed structures and open space, traffic pattern plan, parking plan, and access points. The CCN overlay supersedes the base zoning district regulations and permits additional height and density. There are 2 general notes before the applicant gives their presentation. 1, the traffic plan will be reviewed by city planning in consultation with the DPW and the Regional Transit Authority. And 2, the traffic impact analysis will be reviewed by city planning in consultation with DPW, the Port of New Orleans, and Convention Center representatives. The applicant now has 10 minutes to present.
Thank you, Haley. So as Haley mentioned, we were here last month and we did a pretty comprehensive overview of the project. And I think the biggest question mark was the landscape plans and asking for a little bit more delineation on that. So if we want to jump to slide 39. So this was in last month's presentation, but this is looking at the existing convention center promenade at the convention center and how we're talking about how we're trying to continue that promenade across the Riverside parcels of Convention Center Boulevard down through the River District, and then hopefully extending all the way to the power plant. And you can go to the next slide. And it starts to delineate that a little bit more. And we were asked to show, because we don't necessarily know specifically what's going on in each parcel. We have a general idea of a conceptual plan, but it really depends on what developers come in to do each individual parcel. We provided conceptual plans. So for example, you can see in the top right, that's looking at Convention Center between Henderson and Uturk. So we have a 72-foot right of way, and then on the lake side of Convention Center Boulevard, we have a maximum setback of 25 feet, and then 15-foot minimum, which is what the office building is providing. You can see the office building is a little white, box in the top left corner of that. And on the riverside, we have where we're trying to continue the promenade, which has a minimum setback of 30 feet and maximum setback of 50 feet. And you can see that continuing as you look at the second diagram in the middle, where continues on the riverside between Uturk and Race, and then continuing with the last diagram where, we have the same setback of 30 to 50 feet from Race to Orange Street. I want to go to, 42. Yeah, thank you. So this is looking at Ray Street and Uterp Street. So again, these are typical plans. Obviously with Uterp, we know what's happening with a little bit of part of it, with parcel 2A where the office building is. But again, trying to show the conceptual plan, working with Wes Michaels and SMM on developing these to show what we're planning for throughout the district. Where we have parallel parking, shared lanes on the river side of Convention Center Boulevard. We have a BRT lane because the BRT will route down from the overpass, down and around in front of parcel 2A, in front of parcel 5, where the park is, and then around and then back up to downtown or across the West Bay. You can see the shared lanes there as well. And we want to jump to slide 43. And so this is looking at kind of the outskirts streets. So you have Chapatulas on the left and Henderson in the middle, and then Front Street on the right. And most of these are determined. Henderson was already determined that we're not making adjustments to that. That's maintaining the same right of ways that DPW has had previously. Same with CHOP and same, and then with Front Street, we worked in coordination with the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers to determine their setbacks required for the wall, and then providing more of a service lane on Front Street, so that for different loading for those parcels on the river side of Convention Center Boulevard. And then we were also asked to look at a typical intersection, which is on the top right, to show where crosswalks are, to ensure that we're providing ADA accessibility. So we have the ramps for those. And then, here we see the shared lanes. This is, for example, this is at, I believe it's the intersection at Convention Center and Ray Street. So you have the shared lane of Ray Street, the bike lanes, and then you have the BRT routing down and around, which is going in between parcels 7 and 8 on the bottom. So that's really the only adjustments we made to the presentation from last month, trying to provide additional information. So I'll switch over to the board to see if there are any additional questions on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Just looking at this typical intersection, how can you present more about how the landscaping would be prioritized? Because it's really showing that it's not there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only example we can provide right now is the parcel 2A where we have the park, the parcel 2A corner park that does extend out to the street, and there is trees running all the way down to the intersection corner, of course, to the limit of line of sight. We have different green spaces coming out for the parcel 2A park. But a lot of these, it's going to really determine on what goes on in each one. So I think there will be more landscape than what is shown in this typical intersection. I can almost guarantee that, but yeah, I don't know how much more we can really dive into that right now. Yeah.
And we discussed that. We saw how the 200-foot extra setback was meant to create that linear park, but we kind of commented on how there's 3 parcels within that boundary area, and the majority of the setback was on only 2 of the blocks. So we were seeing if you could consider extending it, create more green space that would connect
over onto the last parcel 6, closest to the power plant. I think we can definitely study it. That one's going to be harder to do because we're very tight on just meeting the affordable housing between parcels 5 and 6, trying to provide We're realizing we have to go with stick frame construction for those to keep them, a construction type that is affordable and can actually, make the affordable actually happen. So parcel 5 and 6 are almost being built out to the lot line as much as possible so that we can maximize the number of units, while also lowering the construction type so that it can be affordable. So I think parcel 6 is going to be hard. We'll probably hit either that 15-foot or 25-foot setback. I do know on parcels 4, 7, and 8, we're starting to study, how do we create more courtyards and green spaces throughout those where, I'm not from New Orleans, but I think what's beautiful about New Orleans is the mystery and discovery of it. But you find these hidden courtyards throughout New Orleans, and we're trying to start integrating that into parcels 4, 7, and 8, which are the Riverside ones, as we study that. And so, again, I can't necessarily guarantee that there will be more green spaces, but we are really starting to look at how do we incorporate those more so on the Riverside of the convention center.
Okay, right, because the regulations ask for landscape plans within the first 25 feet. So I think these, what you've shown us now is a great start, and it really highlights where more open space areas could be included. So if y'all could just take that back and study it and consider it. Also, let the record reflect that Joanna Farley is now present.
Yeah, Haley, I think the second one Andrew's talking about, it's gonna come down to 5 and 6 and the affordable housing, the residential components, and how many units we can fit on there. If we can, on those 2 units, provide enough to meet what we're trying to for the district, we may have more space on that last parcel to do more of like a high rise residential, which would allow us to free up more space at the ground point. So the intent is to have flexibility in the parcels to be able to do that. We won't have it pinned down until we really get to study parcels.
And I think that was the intent of these requesting the typical landscape plans to show how you're starting to consider the courtyards and the open space within the 25 feet. So, yeah.
I would take a very far more cautious approach, both from an urban design point of view and your specific building siting and your building massing kind of an issue. Because I think the language that you use about courtyards in New Orleans does not necessarily translate into courtyards in bigger buildings. So you got to be very, very careful about that before you begin. And I am not speaking in terms of anything else, but essentially from the perspective of the guidelines you're going to impose on others who are going to develop those specific lots. So I think it is important that you memorialize those concepts in a practical manner as you move forward. One. The second part relating to intersections, landscaping, and monuments that we might put in place, public art, whatever that might be. It's not so much a practical issue in terms of dimensionality, because you can achieve transparency at corners through various other means. So what I would suggest to you is to put into place some kind of a language that provides that transparency. And I'm saying this on purpose because from a larger scale perspective, your entire concept is based on vehicular traffic and not pedestrian traffic. Okay, I have a problem with that to begin with, but I won't go there because I'm coming into the game a little too late. At the same time, when you have a focus on vehicular traffic and vehicular movement, and you got a large development that is going to necessarily have a large amount of traffic going back and forth without adequate transparency at corners and visibility, you will have accidents. And I don't think looking at your initial conceptual, inspirational pages that talks about scale, massing, traffic, courtyards, all those kind of things don't match up with what you are proposing. I think there is a total disconnect. That is my view.
If I may add, so each building that is, taller than the base zoning height of 85 feet or 40,000 square feet and or 40,000 square feet is required to come back to design review. So as each parcel is being developed, those specifics will be addressed per parcel.
I understand that, but as master planners, if you do not memorialize it and put it into what you expect the next developers to come up with, they are not going to necessarily comply. All I'm saying is you need to memorialize it as the master planners so that the next person who comes in here is following that step.
Okay, let's try to keep the discussion amongst the committee members, and if we have questions, we'll kind of reach out. Is there any other comments from the committee members?
I don't know, until you see like a more developed landscape plan.
More developed landscape plan. So as I mentioned, at the beginning, we are on a timeline to complete review, so this will be the last DAC meeting that they're scheduled for. Some of our options would be to approve it with provisos, or, this is a recommendation to Bob. So we can list out what's missing or deficient if that we would like to feedback, but, our goal for today would be to come up with some type of motion to meet that deadline. So I do understand there's a lot of missing information, and we've kind of already reached out about that.
Is there a reason why there's a lot of missing information? I'm not really quite sure because we addressed all the items.
If this is in relation to the actual detail of the landscape plan, I think it comes back to the fact that we don't know
We
what
can
those
discuss
parcels.
this later.
yeah.
We're gonna set another meeting, but we do, we're reviewing all of the overlay information, and there were some outstanding comments. Last week, they did provide a response, but that's still within review, and we will meet, this week to talk about it. However, my point was to the committee members, if y'all did not feel there was sufficient detail to comment on things, we can bullet point those out.
I propose that we conditionally approve this based on the provisos that all the committee members have put in provided so far, and that we would like to see more detailed development plans for each parcel that meets those provisos.
Does anyone have any friendly amendments to that motion? So we have a motion by Capital Projects for approval, subject to the modifications that were discussed. Do we have a second? We have a second by Parks and Parkways. All in favor? All opposed? And the motion passes. Okay, so the next item on today's agenda is consideration of design review 624. We have Sarah as the map person, and she'll give a brief presentation, and then the applicant will have 10 minutes to present.
Design review, sorry.
Yes, can you switch to item 3, please? Actually, can you go to page 25?
Thank you.
1, 3.
Today, are they?
Yeah, we
No,
submitted
actually,
a few
they're not
weeks ago.
submitted. We received them July 6th, I believe.
Like third.
July
July
3rd.
3rd.
So in the agenda link. To the page,
and there were no on. I just was saying, they did the same drawing.
Although they've made modifications.
The committee members are always supposed to.
They were posted on the website, on the city planning site.
The website, there's the agenda. And that has links to one stop. The one stop case.
Did we forget to put them in wrong?
Drawing. I'm just adding, because,
You haven't seen them, that's.
I mean,
great.
that's fine, I was curious why that would be. And also, just wondering, if the agenda used to have just the link,
The link to our website where we uploaded.
uploaded the drawing.
So now we have them in both places. It appears that we've forgotten this item to put it in wrong, so it may not, the updated drawings may not be.
Because the only thing on the website was the agenda.
Oh, okay, so.
All right.
As of yesterday,
As of this morning.
this morning.
So I assumed y'all were moving to a new paradigm.
No.
Go to Llama, so I went to Llama.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, I just wanted to.
No, I didn't know that you didn't see them.
It's okay. I just.
Design review 624 is for property on Convention Center Boulevard between Utrip and Henderson Streets within the CCN Convention Center Neighborhood Overlay District. This request was previously considered at the June DAC meeting and was deferred to allow the applicant time to address comments and for all committee members to be present. The proposal is for a new 10-story office tower with commercial units on the ground floor and parking on levels 2 through 6. This review focuses on the general design review standards in section 4.5, the site and building design standards for the CCN overlay in section 18.24, and the design standards for the RIV Riverfront Design Overlay Districts, section 18.13. The applicant submitted revised drawings that show 1, precedent images that show how the proposed design relates to the concept for all overall river district character. The applicant also provided renderings for the rest of the district and other local architectural references. 2, the pedestrian experience at the streetscape level, including landscaping and open space. Sheet 25 shows a perspective from the pedestrian view, giving a spatial understanding of the primary entranceway and approach to the building. A plaza fronting Uterp Street at the corner of Convention Center Boulevard shows pedestrian movement along sidewalks, ramped benches along the entranceway, and ramping from the drop-off semicircular driveway to the primary entrance. The ground floor shows transparent windows with a canopy overhang that wraps around the following Convention Center Boulevard. 4, the applicant modified the cane mail material covering the parking levels. This de-emphasizes the visual impact of the parking garage by showing lighter tones and texturing that appear less stark. 5, the addition of vertical elements articulated from the ground floor through the parking garage and upper floors successfully de-emphasize the flatness of the horizontal band, showing breaks in the massing, accomplishing better continuity of the vertical design. Staff analysis finds this review requires additional information as follows. All designated retail areas on the ground floor shall show compliance with a minimum ceiling height of 12 feet in accordance with Article 18, Section 18.24. Site plan shall indicate dimensions of driveways and shall comply with Article 22.3. Plans shall include striping and furnishing zones to promote pedestrian safety from automobile traffic in accordance with Article 18.24.d.3.m. And approval of this item requires a complete application of the Development Master Plan materials for review. This is required because of the proposed 138-foot structure that exceeds the 85 feet allowable height of the base zoning district.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. You all now have 10 minutes to present.
Sure. So I'd like to start with kind of going through some of the comments that we received in the last meeting and subsequent follow-ups. I think the first comment that was received was, could we look at potentially changing the materials, specifically below the garage level, to be able to relate more to the surrounding context and sort of some of the other imagery that we had proposed. Originally, we had more of a limestone base at the base of the building in conjunction with the glass for the lobby and retail. We've looked at potentially changing that to a dark orange spot blend that goes with our palette, but changing that material from a limestone to a brick, we feel is probably more in tune with some of the imagery that's been presented from the district. that reference to those can be on the elevations of pages 32 and 34, which show specifically where those locations of brick would now occur. Next to the lobbies, the retail spaces, and then as we transition to the back of house spaces, it would go back to the original metal panel screening. We also show those conditions and renderings on pages 26 and 29. You can actually see here in this view, band between the glass entry for the lobby. It's hard to really see on the screen, but that's a location on the specific side to the park where we've changed that materiality below the overhead canopy. The next comment was really some of the images that we had in renderings were more specifically aerials and contextual from above and not at the pedestrian and human experience. So one of the questions was, could we see more imagery that shows the pedestrian experience around the building design and specifically from 60 feet down? We've included new renderings and perspectives from pages 23 to 30, which really move around the building from the base level. There's the first two images kind of show contextually what the building looks like in the district. The remaining, what that experience would look like and entail as you move around the building. The next comment that we received was to really provide reference on how the building design is meeting the River District Design Guidelines. So the design guidelines, which were originally on pages 23 to 24, have been moved and expanded upon in this submission. There's now a section dedicated specifically to how we think the building meets the design guidelines for the district. Those beginning on page 65. And in this section, we provide written explanations with various design guidelines that are specific to the River District and how in written form with imagery of the building, how we believe the building is meeting the design guidelines and the intent for the district. And again, those start on page 65. So there's a series of vignettes around the building and a series of sections from the design guidelines in juxtaposition to show some of the major themes that we're looking at from an office building perspective and how we feel like that meets the design guidelines of the district.
Part of this.
So where would you like to start? Because it's going to be tough in 10 minutes to probably go
Maybe we
through.
can just keep going.
Okay.
I think we can, the prior item took a lot shorter, so. we can-
I still have a few more to
Sure,
cover.
no, I'm saying you can have an additional
I was
sentence.
just asking staff to maybe go
The
through.
slide deck as a, okay,
While you're talking.
okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Where you want to start? 23.
I think starting from probably page 23 on, because everything above that, I think the committee's already seen. So right here and kind of working your way through. And the other comments that were kind of brought up that we tried to address regarding the design characteristics of the building is that there was some concern that the building felt too contemporary for New Orleans. There was also concern about the amount of glass not feeling as much New Orleans as some precedents that we've had in the past. There was a comment about it feeling too glamorous for the River District. And then there was, I think, concern over the original design of the garage screens feeling flat and lacking texture. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way the renderings and the distances that the renderings were showing from the building felt very flat with no texture. So what we tried to address with those comments was new renderings that really illustrate, they get closer to the building. We've brought samples of what that material is like, screening the garage. And in order to address kind of the flat aspect of the parking garage, one of the things we were looking at the time and running traps with the manufacturers of the product was is there a way to, instead of having it be flat, to have it move and pick up on some of the themes of the building above? And so we've gone through the garage design and redesigned it to actually have movement. And I think probably the best slide to show the material and how it's been used in other locations around the world is on page 62, which is a new slide that we showed in the section of precedent imagery of how we really intend the garage screening to work. So the image to the left is the actual material and what it would look like in reality. What's great about this material is from a passively ventilated garage, we need a certain amount of opening. This provides 75%, which is really, really high, but from the exterior, it only allows 25% visibility into the garage. And it actually bumps up when you start to fold that material in a way like the images on the left show. The bottom two images to the right are also the same material. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but it shows how this material can be used in different ways to create movement and this idea of sort of sculptural elements within the screening. And then the image to the top right is a project we've done in Chicago, which uses not the same product, but a similar where the parking garage actually moves and kind of dances around. So it's a performative aspect that sort of separates that podium parking from the office above. So this slide is also part of a new section in which we provide basically precedent studies of really the river district, the current context. We also show immediate context to the future, specifically around where parcel 2A is going to be located, with additions to the convention center that are being proposed and planned by other architects, as well as directly adjacent across the street to the museum that's being proposed by EDR here in New Orleans. So I think those images, and I believe that slide is the one right above it, 61, really begins to show what the context and other architects are looking at around our site, and that it is very contemporary and modern. So we feel that our building fits in with sort of the design language that other architects in the district are looking at. There's also a series of contemporary buildings within New Orleans that we feel our building aligns more with. There's also a section on glazed buildings within New Orleans where we feel like, while it isn't a huge typology, there are precedents within the city that are predominantly glass, from more modern and postmodern to more contemporary, particularly some of the new buildings like on Tulane's campus. So within this, we've provided different precedents. And then at the end, there's also precedent examples in which the development team has referenced and looked at from previous cities that have done successful developments like this. Those two being the District Wharf in Washington, D.C., which has, again, this blend of rustic and modern sort of warehouse type buildings and more contemporary office buildings. And the other precedent is in Boston, the Seaport District, which is, again, a very similar sort of concept. So we've provided all these different examples as sort of an addendum at the end of the package, and hopefully that kind of explains, our point of view for the district.
We were under 10 minutes. But thank you. I would open it up to committee discussion, and one thing, I'm not sure whether you kind of pointed on was some changes to the upper floors to kind of add some banding and.
There's nothing, we haven't really adjusted the upper floors, but there is a slide, and I think this kind of speaks to our interpretation of what was kind of driven by the design guidelines and how we feel like we meet the intent. Again, with an office building, Class A office building, the market is really looking for flexible design, and obviously the glass box gives you the most flexible. There is a little bit of articulation and materiality and decorative elements to it. But if you go to slide 69, really in the design guidelines, the specific language is about articulating building mass with hierarchy, rhythm, and material transitions. And so this slide for us was indicated of how this building is doing that, both horizontally across the building and this idea of the gradient that expands and compresses on the facade, as well as both vertically in terms of the pedestrian level, the parking level, the amenity level, and the office, and how we're using each one of those sections and doing offsets to kind of accentuate both the experience at the ground level and then sort of the break in massing from the parking podium to the glass office up above.
Let me ask you a question. I read these red line, vertical line, and blue vertical line as the kind of rhythmatic kind of scenario that you're trying to present. Are they actually fins that move up above the roof line, or are they just illustration of the rhythm that you're following?
It's just illustration of the rhythm we're following. So in this section, the blue line actually is indicating the 30-foot structural grid to the building.
Okay.
At the amenity level and at the pedestrian level, the columns are actually exposed on the exterior. But behind that is actually the metal panels that are faceted that cover those columns on the glass portion of the building. Those are indicated by the blue. The yellow and the red are following the 5-foot grid that is typical on an office building set forth across the facade. The blue is actually, the blue is the faceted panels in the columns, but the red is actually a vertical fin. It's a metal panel to match the flat faceted. So those would be more of like a 12-inch vertical fin. And then the red is just indicating the areas where there aren't fins, but there would be an actual mullion joint. So within the grid, and in that, we're kind of showing this expansion across where those things would be articulated and kind of expand and compress as they go around the building.
The reason why I'm saying is without the lines projecting beyond the roof line, it's very difficult to sort of visualize what you're talking about. I wonder whether extension of any one of those rhythms going beyond the roof line might actually help visualize what you're talking about. So it's just a comment, but I want to go back to something, I think it was on slide 62, where I observed some of the examples. Yeah, right there on the bottom right corner, you have the same metal screening, which is kind of coloration that sort of begins to show a wave. It begins to sort of enunciate some of your cultural experiences in the context there. And I'm wondering, I know a little bit of history of New Orleans, and that is dangerous. So looking at the location where this building is supposed to be and the history of it, is there some way by which you could use something similar to that to make an artistic rendering of that heritage and legacy that part of New Orleans is?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just voicing an opinion here, and I'm just thinking there is an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to do that. It's not quite as pronounced as it is on the
I'm
bottom
looking
right.
at this photograph of Chicago, and it's very subtle.
Yeah.
And Chicago, like in New Orleans, is a very dark sky. It's a very gray sky. So you're not going to see the subtlety as much as you can see the more brighter colorations, because that's the contrast that you're working with.
Yeah.
And for being a visual person, I'm just voicing that opinion. You might want to change that direction.
And some of their original drawings were emphasizing cypress trees as a vertical element, so I don't know if you wanted to carry that thing over.
Well, so like this particular building in Chicago is obviously inspired by wind, the Windy City, the movement of wind. That is a different system.